Hello and welcome. I'm going to be talking about the portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer I and the artist Gustav Klimt and how it relates to Alfred Gell's The Technology of Enchantment in the Enchantment of Technology, as well as Clifford Geertz's Art as a Cultural System. So a little bit of a background on Gustav Klimt. He was born in 1862 in Vienna, Austria. He was the second of 7 children. His father, Ernest Klimt, was a gold engraver, which he was known to be criticized highly on a new symbolized language, which was overtly sexual and disturbing to many. Many of his new radical themes and material was called pornographic, and his works were not accepted. So a quote that I have from Gustav Klimt is, "I have never painted a self-portrait. I am less interested in myself as a subject for painting than I am in other people, above all women. There is nothing special about me. I'm a painter who paints day after day from morning to night. Whoever wants to know something about me ought to look carefully at my pictures." So here I find it very interesting that he invites the viewers to learn more about him through his artwork. Specifically, we see there's even a halo around her head, and that is filled with circular objects that are gold and blue, and that's contrasted with squares right outside of that halo that are red. And these geometric contrasts create this very sophisticated pattern that Klimt incorporates throughout his painting. And we can even see the enchantment of the technical skill of the rendering of her very cold neck and arms and body. Face. We see, the blending of his naturalism and how it's really, it's both reality and fantasy in one painting. And this complex pattern that he creates conveys a very strong richness to it of wealth. And what I found even more enchanting was the fact that he used the technique of impasto, which is greatly applying different pieces of the painting with a thick layer of paint. So it creates a 3D impression, which is really an illusion that Klimt uses. And lastly, what's even more enchanting is to think about the time that this was finished and how it was presented. Instead of being under fluorescent lighting, it was shown under candlelight. And you can imagine the sense of, glowing, pristine, a divine painting to those who viewed it. This, glowing woman of gold. Gell talks about George Simmel, who was a German sociologist and philosopher, as well as a critic. He writes, "The value of an object is related to its capacity to resist our desire to possess it." And I believe that the portrait of Adele is, if not the best example of this, because if we think about something we want to, we can't resist, that we want to possess, a great example of that is gold. Gold is something we see as wealth, and we picture ourselves with it if we see it. So when we see this painting, we also are thinking about our own selves, and our desire to have it, which adds to its value. And another interesting thing is that critics actually use the phrase "more brass than block." And that really emphasized how in this one painting, there's just so much money and value connected to it. And so the painting actually sold for, I think in 2006, for about $150 million. So first, to give a good understanding, I will use Gel's example of the Trovian canoe prow to compare the prow's enchantment to the enchantment found in the portrait of Adele Blanche-Bauer I. So as we can see, the Trovian canoe prow was known because it had its eye-catching vivid colors and the ability to be an illusion or disorient the viewer. So we can see the painted canoe prow has streaks of red that pop out against the white with the wooden carved intricate details. So Gell writes, human beings are innately sensitive to eye spot patterns as their bold tonal contrast and brilliant colors, especially red, all of them features of the canoe board design. And so if we're looking at Gustav Klimt's portrait of Adele, we can see that similar. Adele's position even in a golden throne surrounded by this very simple but complex composition. If we look more carefully, it is a simple composition, but the background becoming alive through her gown. You can see the intricate designed golden and silver leaf details with spots of oil color. So specifically, we can see it, there's like a halo around her head with spots of blue and red. And so what I found even more enchanting is that Gustav used the technique of impasto, which actually is where artists greatly apply areas with paint to create a 3D impression. As you can see below, right here, the small little picture of a piece on the painting that's actually coming alive, and you can see more popping out, creating an illusion. And it even seen in 1907 when it was finished, to be seen not under fluorescent lighting like in a museum or gallery. It would be shown with candlelight. So you can imagine the viewers' enchantment with this piece glowing almost under candlelight. So Alfred Gell writes, the power of an art object stems from the technological processes they objectively embody. The technology of enchantment is founded on the enchantment of technology. The enchantment of technology is the power that technological processes have of casting a spell over us so that we see the real world in an enchanted form. Art as a separate kind of technological activity only carries further through a kind of innovation, the enchantment which is inanimate in all kinds of technical activity. So really reinforcing the idea that casting a spell over us, this piece of enchantment, so we can see the real world in an enchanted art form. So finally, we'll talk about Clifford Geertz and the art as a cultural system. So Geertz talks about how art is difficult to talk about. It is now intimidating to walk into a gallery and museum and ask questions. It feels though art is a domain for experts to talk about. So Geertz says, only in the modern age and in the West that some people have managed to convince themselves that technical talk about art is sufficient to a complete understanding of it. Which doesn't make sense, because if we only look at the technicalities of a piece of art, we miss so much. As Goldwater said, art serves as a primary document. Art is something you can look at yourself through and see history, see historical events, religious icons, or anything really. It captures history. And Geertz's idea is that instead of technical talk, we must recognize a piece of art as a symbolic expression of a significant experience of its creator. So for example, if we're talking about Gustav Klimt, we're talking about his mature pieces are, yes, they're characterized by a rejection of society, because they didn't follow the naturalistic styles that society was honing on. And they utilize symbols of symbolic elements to convey psychological ideas and emphasize the freedom of art from traditional culture. So using the portrait of Adele is a good example because Gertz creates an image that not only captures his relationship with Adele, blocked by her, but his experience with her and how that is conveyed through the painting. And we see that because we've noticed that her body and her background, they're disjointed. There's emotional behavior tied into this painting because of their relationship. And finally, Gertz writes, the painter's true medium is the capacity of his audience to see the meaning in pictures, a product of collective experience. So again, emphasizing the experience coming to play when we're talking about art and understanding it, not just relying on technical talk. So, let me move my pictures so you can see. So lastly, these are both paintings of Adele, and they're it's the only woman that Gustav's painted twice. So I thought it was important to show. And they both hang together in the New Gallery in New York, side by side. Thank you.